Oh, hello, everybody. It's me, hello, Jason, everybody. And over there it's Dan.
Hello.
From our Boston bureau. I like it.
I'm in Boston.
What a great view you have out your green screen.
I tell you, it's you'd think it'd be dark by now, too.
I know, right? But it's not. Anyway, anywho, as they say, it is Apple results quick reaction from us to you. There are charts. There are numbers. Who doesn't love a chart and who doesn't love a number? Dan, I just posted a story that I usually write later in the evening, but I wanted to get it out before a newsletter went out for our members. Become a Six Colors member. If you're not, you get a newsletter, you get a podcast, you get all sorts of stuff. And the the imagery that I used at the beginning of it is, I feel like Tim Cook was probably like doing donuts around Apple Park, and he may have dunked a basketball this afternoon because
he couldn't dunk before either. That's the best part.
He's just powered by the money. Okay, look, Apple does record financial quarters all the time. And this is yet another record fiscal fourth quarter for them. This closes their fiscal year. So that was impressive. Because it closes their fiscal year, they could say fiscal 25, also a record, the most revenue Apple's ever generated in a year by kind of a lot, actually. If you look at the numbers, I will have charts of that I'll post next week in Six Colors. You might see them later today if we have time. But that's not the big thing, because after doing all of that, he said, oh, by the way, as if he were Alexa, by the way, next quarter that we are only partially through now will be an all-time record Apple quarter with all-time record iPhone sales. At which point, I think all of the financial people just fell over. And that's when he dunked. That's when he dunked the basketball right then.
I like to imagine that in the music playing in his AirPods in that moment was, y'all ready for this? Do, 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 do. Yeah, he's just dancing in his seat there.
Yeah.
Notoriously.
CEO from Auburn, Tim Cook. Dun, do, 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 do. Like the Chicago Bulls. Like they're introducing Michael Jordan. Anyway, I just got like, that's what a play that was in a moment where they're like, oh, we're worried that the iPhone is only up. Oh, what did you say? Next quarter is record, and they do the thing where it's like, please note these are forward-looking statements that could change, but I mean they made them. They don't.
It's
usually
a little bit
that.
like when they rolled out the M1, and then later on in the year they did. Oh, we've got the M1 Pro. We've got the M1 Max. Mm-hmm. That's pretty great. Those things blow away. The M1. Oh, we've got an M1 Ultra. Like they keep just piling on. Yeah. So it was only I think last quarter, Jason, that we talked about the like sooner or later 100 billion is going to be a ho hum quarter for Apple.
Yep.
And we don't have enough of a trend line yet to say that, but they did break 100 billion this quarter, a non-holiday quarter. Mm-hmm. Right? They were a 104 or something.
In fact, Dan, let's
let's go to the charts.
Look at the chart.
Let's go to the charts.
What is happening? It is total Apple revenue. I should probably set this up so that you can see what I'm seeing.
Sorry, I'll just look at the.
You can just look at the live stream a little late there.
It's a little behind.
I changed it so you can see what I see.
Oh, there we go. Now I can see what you see.
102.5 is the answer.
102.5. Okay.
Just without breaking a sweat. This is one of those not a record by anything, but I would say outside of
first holiday, non-holiday.
Outside of the holiday quarter, it's the first time they've broken 100 billion in revenue without.
And the other thing to note about that, which we'll get into, is yes, obviously there is about 10 days of iPhone 17 related sales here.
Yeah. First week sales.
10 days out of a 3-month quarter.
Exactly. So it's diluted.
It's diluted.
And that
it's
little
not
bump,
a big quarter.
The little bump above the previous 95 and 94 billion. I mean, we'll look at the iPhone chart too in a minute, but that's what it is. But the point is that today, October 30th, they know more than 10 days of iPhone sales, right?
Sure.
Now they know 40 days of iPhone sales, right. 45 days of iPhone sales. I think
it's also the reminder that it was a $100 billion quarter in which the only things they released were in the last 10 days. right? The Q3 is not typically a high-performing quarter because it is the summer. They generally don't release a lot of products in the summer, and you just get that last tail of the iPhone, which gives you a little bump for sure. But it's not like it's, we're going to see if this is an indication, right? And obviously they did signal it, is going to be a truly massive quarter. And you look at that quarter the last couple of holiday quarters, we're talking 120 plus or minus. So that means if they're going to have a record quarter, they're going to clear 124.
Yeah, I did. I did the math in my story that's just up on Six Colors now. It is that quarter is going to be about 140 billion. And iPhone sales will be a minimum, if they meet their double digit, which they said, minimum of 76 billion in iPhone sales, which would be a record by a substantial amount.
Not that long ago, that would have beat an entire quarter.
Just
on its own. Yeah.
An entire year.
Anyway,
not that long ago. But
we'll talk about that too, because it was also a record year.
It was a record
revenue.
year. It was a record year, and there may be some charts for that. But anyway, so yes, it was. The story here. It's funny. The story here, I think, is actually the guidance more than anything else, because for them to be so. There were questions coming to this. People were asking me on various podcasts, like, are they going to say how it's going? Because these numbers don't reflect very much of iPhone sales. And the answer is, not only did they say that it's going to be an enormous record quarter and record iPhone sales next time, which means they know how well it's going, but they actually said one of my favorite things about when Apple gets it wrong a little is the supply constrained. They're like, somebody, cleverly, little analyst is like, how about by product? What's the mix like? And they don't want to tell you. No. But Tim Cook said, we don't even know. I mean, it was very much like, look, if I knew, I wouldn't tell you, but I don't even know, because they're supply constrained. They can't actually judge how many they would need to make to fulfill supply or to fulfill demand, because they can't make enough. And he said, at one point, I mean, that was really a little dunk moment that I didn't even put in it, is when he said, there's not a ramp issue, he said, which, let me translate. Sometimes it's hard to sell products at the beginning. You don't have enough to sell because you're still kind of ramping up your factories. That's what he means there. But, again, as he's got the basketball in his hands and he's getting ready to go up to the hoop, he says, there's not a ramp issue. It's just we have very strong demand. Like, no problem. Just like, what he's saying there. He's like, no, it's not an issue. We're making lots of them, but they just are flying off the shelves. So this is Apple at kind of a level of incredible confidence that they make a lot of money and they do this all the time and all that. I don't think I've seen it quite as much as this one, where they are supremely confident in how strong the iPhone is going to be.
It is interesting too, where, just to like throw another product in the mix there, but like they also mentioned in that forward-looking statement that the Mac was going to have a tough compare because of the M4, MacBook Pro, Mac Mini, and iMac launched last year. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, didn't you just launch a bunch of M5 products?
Yeah, but it's just like that 14-inch. And in fact, I felt kind of bad because Tim Cook talked about this, and this is in my story. At sixcolors.com, people can read it, but like Mac has had a really good 2 years. Mac revenue is up 13. We'll get there. I'm going to say that because we're going to talk about the tough compare. But let me go through what we've got here. So total Apple revenue, you saw it. Here's the profit number: $27.5 billion in profit. For kicks, for fun. And that's a really nice year-over-year trend.
Again, probably a record-breaking quarter, non-holiday. Yeah.
In terms of non-holiday for profit, maybe not. I think so, probably.
I think it is. Yeah.
And then year-over-year total revenue change. After a year where they kind of gave back a bunch of their growth that they had, the enormous growth that they had, it's another one of these kind of mid to high single digit. They had 10% last time. It was 8% this time. But like that's over the year ago quarter, just kind of showing that growth. And then I'll throw in here's the category. This is just to remind people how big the iPhone is. 48% of the revenue. Services, 28% of the revenue. And then, Mac and iPad and wearables, those are all high single digits at this point, parts of Apple's business. They're all, the rule of thumb I always said was like they're 10% of Apple's business, but they're not. They're less than 10% of Apple's business at this point because services is so much bigger and iPhone is so much bigger. Okay, let's look at products, and we will start with the iPhone, of course. This is one of those things where, again, I think one of the reasons they're pumping up iPhone numbers is that people are like, people want to know how the iPhone is doing, and these numbers aren't going to give you a good sense of it. In fact, if these were the new iPhone numbers, everybody would be a little freaked out because $49 billion is a nice iPhone revenue number, but it's not that much higher than it's been the last 2 quarters.
Right.
And if you look at the year-over-year change, it's only up 6% year-over-year. But again, like we were saying, you're backing in that iPhone sales are probably kind of a little slack at the very end of the cycle, and then you get 10 days of new iPhone orders. But this is why you look at the 6% growth, and if you're Apple, you're like, let's assure them that it's a record next time. We're confident enough to do that, so that's what they do. Yeah, and we talked about the iPhone a lot, but let's talk about services. Dan, number goes up.
Number goes up.
It's gone up.
2 exceptions. Number goes up.
Forever. The services number has gone up year over year for a very, very, very long time. I just want to say it's gone up sequentially for a very long time, a very long time.
Since 2022. There's like a little dip in 2022, and then it quickly regains and then goes.
That was it. And now it's just up. It was also it was an all-time revenue record in all geographics except Greater China, which was only a fourth quarter revenue record. But the services business is just an engine of growth for Apple. And what you see here is this is a magnifier because, again, just to remind people, services, nobody buys Apple services really unless they're in the Apple ecosystem. So what this is a metric of how Apple, they talk about their install base and that they've set a record for installed base, which is people using all these different devices. The services is that high margin additional stuff that they sell to people who are in their ecosystem. So, sometimes there are pundits who will say, Apple's just a services company now. It's not really true. Services is just all the way that Apple sells you more stuff after you buy an iPhone or a Mac or an iPad.
Right. And it's also a reminder, so the overall gross margin for the company, which is basically their profit, is around 47%. Now, that's pretty good, but you have to remember that's because services gross margin is 75.3%.
Yeah.
That means 75% of that revenue is profit.
Yeah, this is my product and services total profit, and the more, I think third quarter is where you're always going to get that moment where services may surpass product. We haven't gotten there yet. I think we will maybe next year.
It's getting close.
But you can see that the difference here is, product includes the iPhone. It's an enormous amount, but the difference is, and this is a rough metric because I'm just dividing, the revenue by the share number, the margin number. So, but still, the point is services is incredibly lucrative. And so, truthfully, you could say I would argue that Apple's product margins are in reality, maybe I get drummed out of business school, but I never went to business school, so this will work out. I'd say thinking of Apple's product margins on their hardware the way you do is actually kind of wrong because Apple doesn't sell hardware. They sell hardware, software, services as a bundle, essentially, and you don't have to pay for Apple services, but so many people do that the truth is an iPhone is incredibly profitable beyond what its listed margin is because along with that iPhone, you are selling, if you're Apple, you are selling an additional incredibly profitable service that sits on top of it.
Yeah.
That's why they call it money.
Everybody.
Oh yeah, here's the iPhone revenue change again, but the services revenue change. That was the one I hadn't shown. Again, double-digit growth for quite a while. They had that one sort of slow period after they really went up. So, they really grew so exponentially with services that it was a hard act to follow. And so it's a tough compare. Sorry, I should use the phrases, the term of art.
Use the correct lingo, please.
But it's been, it just chugs along year over year. Not only is it sequentially up, but it's just year over year, it's just up. You can see they're 15% growth every year.
that previous graph always fascinates me too, because the difference, right? Just charting the difference, right? With iPhone is a very seasonal, cyclical, like, okay, up, down, up, down, up, down, whereas services line goes up, right? And it speaks to also Apple's diversification, because by having those two segments of their business, there will be a point where if iPhone sales dip or underperform, services can pick up the slack. And that's how you have two businesses that are very different in the way that they work.
Yep, absolutely. Let's talk about Mac and 8.7 billion in Mac sales, coming off that high again. They really had a high in Mac sales with Apple Silicon and people kind of working at home and buying new computers for home and all of that. They really kind of hit a peak and then have come off of that. But I think as I switch to the change graph, you will
it sustains though too, right? Like that's the thing, is like it's not like it dropped down, but it's not like it went down, it tanked, right? It's not like it went in the basement after everybody bought those Apple Silicon Macs, because I think they've continued to sell more to new customers.
Yeah.
Because they're good products. And even if they don't hit the replacement cycles as often, because those devices have tremendous longevity, I think they still continue to bring in new customers, and they are now starting to see more and more replacement cycles as the first generation of Apple Silicon Macs start to finally perhaps age out.
Right. And this is where we get the tough compare, which was the moment where I kind of felt bad for the M5 MacBook Pro, because what Tim Cook said was, from a Mac point of view, the challenge is that last year was sort of the mother of all Mac launches. All of these, from Mac Mini to iMac to all the MacBook Pros, all launched literally at the same time. And this year, that compares to launching the 14-inch MacBook Pro. I was waiting for the sad trombone. I didn't hear it, but it was implied. So that's a very difficult compare. And then he says, oh, yes, I'm bullish on the Mac. The Mac outgrew the market again, and we feel really well about how it's positioned. But this certain quarter is a difficult compare. So that's the flip side of the iPhone saying it's going to be great, is that even if the Mac continues to do well, generally, they sold new models of almost every Mac in the holiday quarter last year. And they don't have that. All they have is this one 14-inch MacBook Pro, which is fine, but it's not even the highest margin MacBook Pros. It's the low end feature.
It's the ugly duckling of the Mac.
I mean, it's a perfectly nice computer, but like
perfectly fine, but it doesn't sell like the MacBook Air, and it doesn't sell in the. In
fact, they specifically said, and remember, the MacBook Air came out in like March, and they said that the Mac sales, they characterized it as driven by sales of MacBook Air, which I think is really interesting. That thing must be an enormous percentage of Mac sales at this point. Which is kind of fun to think about. iPad. Let's look at iPad. Flat is the answer, which is, it's okay. iPad is kind of finding its level. A little bit of a tough compare here too. They have a new iPad Pro now, but it wasn't part of this quarter. So that'll be a next quarter thing, and I think the iPad Pro isn't the big driver.
It's also not the big driver.
That stuff.
I mean, it was not a substantive change, right? It wasn't like a thing that's going to drive people who had an M4 iPad Pro to upgrade. It's just slotting in a new speed in the basically the same device. So it's a good device, but it's not going to drive it. And then in the last quarter, there wasn't really anything, right? Like the iPad, not a big year for the iPad so far.
So this is my favorite thing in my chart is when there's just a zero, and the bar is nowhere, because it basically was as flat as it can be. We're about to get to a -0, which is even more frustrating, and that's wearable home and accessories.
Which actually isn't doing terrible. I mean, look, it's up after the last two quarters. That's not nothing.
Up sequentially, but flat year over year at $9 billion. Yep. Which, if you look at the numbers recently, that's actually pretty nice, because it was on a real losing streak of deflating for a couple of years. And so -0%, a very slightly down, essentially flat, wearables, home and accessories, it's actually okay. Like, it's sort of stabilized. Now, this is an area where I think Apple is, if you look at this chart, well aware that Apple is leaving some opportunity, some money on the table by not having a coherent home strategy. I think most of what happened this quarter that allowed it to start tipping back up is that there was AirPods Pro 3, which nice. But
New Apple Watches too, but yeah, mainly the AirPods Pro
Yeah.
3 I think are probably the big driver.
I would think so. And maybe the holidays will help there. But this is also, I harp on this every time we talk about this category, but like this is the category where you look at it and say, well, wait a second, why have we completely fumbled our home strategy? Because they have, like, and according to Mark Gurman, they're working on a camera and a screen that you can hang on the wall or use as a HomePod with a screen. And there's a tabletop robot, which is not a robot, but whatever. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on there. So there
are the other wearable stuff
working
in there too, right? Like the smart glasses, which of course we know they
Sure, they're
reportedly are working on now. But like, there's also a room in the wearables division to do more there too. So, with the Vision Pro, we've talked about the Vision Pro's impact on this category before. It's not huge, but it's not nothing. And I think, adding more products into that mix gives them a lot more ability to kind of like blanket approach, like, hey, we got all these products, right? Because it's kind of the catch-all category.
Yeah. I've got a couple miscellaneous charts here just to put the regions in perspective. China still down, but kind of flattening out. You can see the size of the Americas market versus Europe, Middle East, Africa, and the rest of Asia Pacific and Japan lines. They just mosey along. And that's the regional growth chart for the three major markets. And you can see China gave back a little bit, although Tim Cook says that was almost entirely, he blamed it on that they couldn't fulfill enough iPhone demand, which is interesting.
Yeah, they asked him about that, and he said something to the effect of like, people, I was over there. Yeah. People love it, right? Like,
we couldn't give them what they wanted, basically, is what he's saying there. And, an okay growth, in Americas and pretty good in Europe for Apple. And here's the China tracker that I do some just to show you, just kind of bopping around. They're not hemorrhaging sales in China. They're just not really growing right now. But Cook continues to think that there's opportunity there.
Yeah.
Okay. I do this story every year, and I have not done it yet, but I'm gonna do a preview of the annuals. Which will come, I'll do the story next week, but I was playing around with the charts today because it's always a thing where you're like, oh, I need to set the height higher for my chart because that's an all-time record. So when they said it was an all-time revenue record, I wanted to go and look, and there it is. It's $416 billion in revenue, which is an all-timer. The previous one was that $394 3 years ago. This is fiscal year because their fiscal year has now ended.
Man, yeah, you look at that 2020 to 2021 jump is just, when you quantify it on an annual basis, is bananas.
And every year I write this story, and so I'll write it again next week, and I'll say it again. But like the secret is not taking a big jump, because big jumps happen.
Right.
The secret is you don't give it back.
Yeah.
You don't give that big jump back. And Apple followed their enormous jump from 20 to 21 by going up again and setting a record. And then they only gave back a little bit the next 2 years, and here they are up again. So that is
you go from 2020 to 2025. You're talking 5 years, and they have, not doubled, but what, like 30 or 40% more over 50, that 270, 50% more. Oh, look at that. That is again just kind of, but it's the kind of numbers that make you think like, is somebody lying? Did somebody invent all this? Like, is somebody cooking the books on this? That seems insane, but no, they just made that much money.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you can see it here in terms of the change of, there was that year that they went up 33%. And then since then they've gone up 8, down 3, up 2, up 6. So they're maintaining that huge gain that they made in 21. Here is the services. You will be shocked to see, Dan, that the services line also just keeps going up. But here you can see the trajectory from 12 to 25, and just how, that's weird. It's not quite an order of magnitude greater, but like, I mean,
15 billion to 109
in a year.
Yeah. It's good. It's a good problem to have.
Yeah. Yeah. Now this is the chart that I like to call the sad snake or the sad worm. This is like talk about not giving it back. They built wearables, home, and accessories out of we used to be the other category. And they had that acceleration in the late teens. where they went from it being a 13 billion a year business to a 41 billion a year business. And since then, it's been 40, 37, 36. They're giving a little bit of it back, but I would say they've held on to an enormous. I mean, they're way above where they were when in 17 they were at 13 billion, right? Now they're at 36. So that's pretty good, right? Even if it's not 41, the worm is not that sad.
Yeah. The worm is meh.
The worm's okay. Here's the Mac. Zoom that out.
Fun to go to from 97. That's nice.
And you can, I mean, it goes back that far, so why wouldn't I? So you can see, this is the putting it in perspective, right, of like how much bigger the Mac is than it ever used to be. That, they were toddling the whole, like, even in the iPod era, they were just kind of like toddling along at 3 billion. You have a really good year, it's 5 billion. And then, it starts accelerating, I think, because of the iPod Halo, and then the iPhone hits, and then it's just...
Well, the iPhone really takes off.
And then you can see the big jump that in the era where, okay, people are pulling ahead their Mac purchases or buying Macs because they're working at home, because of COVID and post-COVID work-from-home policies, and Apple Silicon happens. And what you get is, in fiscal 20, they're at 29 billion for the Mac, and they go to 35 and then to 40. And that's that inflationary period. And again, and you and I talked about this, I think probably even 3 or 6 months ago, they gave that back, but they haven't gone, they sort of reverted back to 20, and now they built 30 and now 34. So the Mac business is kind of like, I think what we're seeing is the Mac business stabilizing after having to go through that period where there were not as many Mac sales because everybody bought a Mac over those 2 years.
Right. So the replacement cycles come into play, but those are more sporadic because some people replace their computer every 7 years. Some people replace their computer every 3 years. So it's spread out.
Yeah, but most people aren't doing it every year. And so if you sell a lot of Macs in 21 and 22, those people are not buying Macs in 23 and 24.
But even so, all those people who bought Macs in those periods, like, you're going to get a tranche of them every year probably for the next decade. And so it is going to keep probably ticking up, or like more modestly, but and for a
mid-30s, pretty good,
for
right?
a 40-year-old business.
Well, and in the teens they were in the mid-20s, and now they're in the mid-30s. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Here's the big iPhone chart, preview of that, just to see it's huge.
Yeah, and you get a better idea of those generational jumps in there too, right? Like, because you can sort of see, okay, early years. You can see when they went
to the big phone.
Went to the big phone,
and that was 15, the 153.
They had their couple little dips, and they like stabilized, and now we're in a new range kind of for the last 4 or 5 years. 18
was the iPhone 10, I want to say, era.
Sounds right.
And that got a little bump, and then they got the big bump in 21, and have been just kind of like plowing ahead since then.
Yep.
And here's our friend the iPad, which is like
it's a roller coaster.
Yeah. Yeah, but this is, I think this is another example of, there was a period there, 12, 13, 14, where everybody bought an iPad, and then they didn't need another iPad for a long time. And so then the iPad was just kind of in the doldrums. And their products
used COVID probably as an excuse to, like, oh, we're stuck inside, we might as well buy a new iPad.
Right? Also, the iPad product line got a lot more differentiated then, where there was the base model and the Air and the Pro, and so you could sort of choose your level. And this year was up. I mean, it's sort of like reverting back to 23, which was only down a little from 22. It was up from 24, which suggests to me a level of stability that the iPad has not given back all of the growth that it generated when it went up to 32 billion 1 year. It's given some of that back, but it hasn't gone back down to 20. It's at 28. Yeah. That's pretty good.
And if we see earlier, that 16 to 20 cycle, there was a bit of a dip and then rebound. And I think it will be interesting to see, because it looks, you look at the patterns, you're like, well, it looks like it's headed on that trajectory again. So,
right. So is there another iPad
a little
rebound
bump
coming in 26 or 27? Maybe. Well, those are my charts as I have them. And they can all be seen at sixcolors.com. And the annual ones will be up next week. Any final thoughts about what we saw today from Apple?
Well, there's the usual spate of analyst questions, which I was listening to as I cooked dinner with one ear. So I'm sure I missed some stuff here and there. You and I both laughed, I think, at the Tim getting asked a question he did not want to answer, and then blatantly coming out saying, I am dodging your question.
Yeah, he said he was asked by Wamsi Mohan of Bank of America a little more detail about search revenue because that is part of services. Apple, Cook gave away. They consider that the advertising category, and he's like, so you had the legal stuff. But leaving that aside, he's following up sort of somebody else's question. He says, leaving that aside, what about growth in that category? Because AI, is threatening search revenues. And that's a part of your business, does that threaten you? And Tim was like, well, the advertising category, which is third party and first party, set a record. And Wamsi Mohan said, well, okay, did Apple's internal and the external also both set records? And Tim said, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying the combination of the two set a record. And he says, we don't divulge. And you can hear him back away from his microphone. And then he leans in and says, I'm dodging the question intentionally because we don't split it at that level. It's like, I know, but you don't get to know that part.
Honest. I appreciate that. Yeah. And that followed up, I think, on the question you mentioned, like they asked specifically about the Google antitrust verdict, which they kind of tried to talk around.
Yeah.
And I think then they're like, well, nothing really happened. Like nothing that happened that affected Apple from that fallout.
Yeah, that was basically their answer, right? Is that we, dodged a bullet there, essentially, is what they did, right?
Yeah. So kind of interesting to hear that just, in cases where people try to get more information. As we know, this is the game. People try to get more information out of them. They're very close to the vest about it. But
they don't want to talk about it. They'll talk about what they have to talk about, but nothing else. I had one more note about the call, which I know it's going to make some people angry, but, too bad. I will just say, I think it is very instructive. At the end of every Tim Cook opening statement, he talks about Apple's values and ways that Apple is doing things to reflect their values. And this year's value statement was pretty much what you would expect, which is we're building accessibility features because we think that more people should be able to use our products however they can, no matter who they are. We're advancing environmental work, increasing recycled materials in our products. We're doing education. These are things that he talks about all the time. This is but it's education to train and support American businesses with a manufacturing academy in Detroit. And then there's a paragraph of innovation and user experience investment in the U.S.
In the United States.
Lots of money in manufacturing. The factory in Houston he talked about multiple times that's building servers for private cloud compute. And leading the creation of end-to-end silicon supply chain across the country, which I think has to do with TSMC and a bunch of other stuff going on and creating a silicon supply chain. It is exactly what you'd expect Apple to say today. And I quoted and linked to one of these. I have transcribed every single one of these for more than a decade now. And if you're curious, I encourage you to look back on some of those. You can even click on the tag that I have on 6 Colors, find any of these articles and click on transcripts and you will get them all. But I quoted from one from Q4 2022, so 3 years ago. And suffice to say, it was vastly longer statement of values than they gave this time. And covers lots of topics that Apple doesn't talk about anymore, like inclusion and diversity. I think it says a lot about how some things never change and other things do.
I just to add to that, one thing that jumped out at me similarly is he mentioned in the retail segment that he went to Japan and went to the reopening of their first store there.
Right,
and said he had been there earlier. However, he was also in Japan literally last week on a political junket with the president. That did not come up.
Didn't come up.
So, what they don't talk about, as you said, is almost as significant as what they do talk about. So,
and I guess I'll just, to end this, I'll just say, you could decide how you feel about all of that. I would say that and I have my own feelings about it, and Dan's got his own feelings about it, but I will say, as an observer of Apple, that saying, never let them see you sweat, or the thing about the duck paddling furiously beneath the surface. I'm just saying, as an observer of Apple, I can see I mean, Tim Cook, I just said he was dunking basketballs earlier. When it comes to this stuff, he's like sweating and dodging and trying to, or he's walking over a tightrope. And like, that's how they're playing this. Is they're playing this to behave the way they think they need to behave in order to get the best possible result for Apple. And there are places where you can absolutely see it. And I think it's interesting that like they're still going to talk about accessibility and recycling and environment, but like they don't talk about it like they used to. And then there's other stuff that they don't talk about at all. And then there's this other stuff that they've re-emphasized. And that's just the game they're playing right now. So, you know, those transcripts are still there. I know what they used to say and what they don't say now. And you can take that, you can say good, or you can say bad, or you can say, well, that's 2025 for you. You say what you like. That's just how it is. And that, I think, brings us to the end of the Chartapalooza for this quarter. But Dan, I have it on good authority from Tim Cook that next quarter is going to be, the charts are going to be big.
We'll break out all the time to break out the confetti emoji.
I'm going to have to reset all those tops of my charts because they'll be higher.
Yep.
We're
going to have to, every time we're going to have to launch off. Oh, there, it's another record quarter, Jason.
Yeah. Woo. Very nice. Very nice. All right. That's going to be it for us here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for charting. Thank you for being interested in a video about charts. And visit sixcolors.com and you'll see lots of things that we write about this stuff. Until next time, thanks for being here, Dan.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.